Never thought I'd be covering gaming on this channel, but here we are. Hey, this is MisterMarketing. Today we're talking about not rewarding bad behavior. Sounds easy in concept, but a lot harder to execute. Fair disclosure, I'm really not into the gaming scene much anymore. I'll play some games on my iPad or my Mac, but even then that's fairly uncommon. But the reason I'm making the comments I am about video games is because the advice I have for video games applies to any field of services. Doesn't matter if it's cars, doesn't matter if it's clothing. It's all the same basic principle of voting with your wallet. After doing a little bit of research into the gaming market, y'all are getting messed over bad. Specifically, one of the things I saw on my private feed on YouTube was the crashing and burning of Halo Infinite. To put it in perspective, Halo 3 at its most popular peak had over 1 million players active. Halo Infinite, which is supposed to follow the live service model, after not even 1 year of being out, we're down to less than 2,000 players on Steam. That's bad. So on the one hand, I do want to congratulate the gaming community on standing up, saying no, we're not going to put up with this, we're out of here. But there's still issues. The main issue being is that these types of games should be put out in the first place. This would not be the first time we have broken promises or janky games. Because really, think about this. None of the negatives for Halo Infinite are anything new. Promising features and then dropping them once they got your money. Check. Ridiculous monetization. Check. Being charged more for a game that has less content than previous iterations. Checky check check. And with all these failures and shortcomings, Halo Infinite was still in the top 5 most popular games on Steam when it released. Which means is they already got your money. Maybe not as much of it as they wanted, but they still got it. So that kind of begs the question. Who's at fault for modern AAA gaming? I'll give you a hint. It's not the publishers or the developers. Yep, I said it. But why is it the gaming community's fault? Well, we're gonna dig into that. First one right out the gate is trusting untrustworthy publishers. Even before the Cyberpunk and Battlefield 2042 fiasco, this would not be the first time that gamers have bought a game at release just to find out later on that the game was not as advertised, and then were pacified by the promises of it being fixed later. Fool the gaming community once, shame on the publisher. Fool the gaming community for years upon years on end. So the advice on that is simple. Before you buy a digital good that will only depreciate in cost and appreciate in value, wait it out a bit, exercise some patience. And then if, after launch and getting to see the game in its entirety, figure out that's still a game that you want to purchase. I get it. It's exciting. You've been waiting for months, if not years on end, for this game to come out, and you can't wait to buy it. Thing is, yes, you can wait to buy it. The world is not going to end if you wait a month or less to figure out if a game is in the right state for you to buy it. The second point's where we're going to get real touchy, because it's going to be about microtransactions. Now, I have a pretty hardline stance on microtransactions, though, again, to be fair, I'm not very involved in the gaming community anymore. But my stance on microtransactions is absolutely anything you have to buy after you start playing the game. Credits, cosmetics, it does not matter what it is, if you have to buy it after you start playing, that is a microtransaction. Because think about how it used to be. You paid full price for a game, you brought the game home, you played the game, and that was it. There was no entering credit card details, there was no DLC part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There was none of that. For more or less $60, you got the full game. A common rebuttal to this point is that most people don't buy microtransactions. Or that enough people don't buy microtransactions, it's just a few whales at the top keeping everybody else down. Here's my problem with that. When you've done sales and PR long enough, and you start hearing these kinds of statements, you start to smell things. A very certain smell.
Do you smell it? That smell. The kind of smelly smell. The smelly smell that smells smelly.
Bullshit.
Why?
Bullshit!
But hey, let's see if my salesman sense is right. I'm sure as you can imagine, it's hard to get really firm numbers on how video game companies make their money, but from a little bit of digging around, the numbers aren't looking good. While Investopedia insists that no more than 30% of gamers buy microtransactions, that's not lining up with the other bits of information we are getting. For example, there was a study done that at least 90% of MMO players purchase microtransactions. I know it's rather uncouth here in the States to include Chinese gamers, but if we do, that's already at least a simple majority of gamers right then and there. But what about mobile games? Doesn't look good there either. My content is for fellow Americans. I know that my fellow Americans are terrified of math. So I'm gonna give the simplified version here. For example, Nintendo published Super Mario Run for mobile devices. It was a premium game for $9.99. You got the full game, no microtransactions in there. Nintendo then stated that they have no plans to make another game like that again. Any following games, they intend to have microtransactions in there. The reason being is that they felt that the game underperformed. So that leads to my question. Well, how did the game perform? If you factor in a $9.99 purchase price, and for some of the latest numbers I could get a hold of, over 200 million downloads, you're looking at a hair bit under $2 billion. $2 billion. So let's just say Investopedia is right. Let's just say that 5% of those gamers invest in microtransactions. 5% of 200 million is 10 million. So if you divide the 2 billion revenue by those 5% of players, that would mean that each and every one of those 10 million players dropped $100.
And that's just to get to the same amount of revenue as an underperforming premium game.
On a Mario Run game. And I cannot overemphasize this was on a disappointingly performing game by Nintendo standards. Which means if they did have a game that performed up to their expectations, how much more would that be? So no, it's not just a few whales at the top buying out everybody else. The problem is that unfortunately gamers make a lot of excuses on what's a good microtransaction and what's a bad microtransaction. Some say cosmetics only are okay because it doesn't change the gameplay. Others will say DLC is fine because they just want more game. Some will say season passes are okay because I can't think of why that'd be okay. The main issue here is that the gaming community has a value proposition problem. In exchange to get a game sooner, or in exchange to experience a modicum more content in a game, they're willing to spend far more money than they ever should on said game. So that's kind of the view as far as the perspective hold. What about the individual? What do you do about it? Now, I've seen plenty of arguments where it's not worth the individual player changing their ways, especially if other players around them won't change. That's bullshit. Because think about this from a marketing perspective. Say no other gamer does what we've talked about in terms of how to stop rewarding bad behavior from publishers. Do you know what you get at the end of it? Saving your money. Don't get around, I get it, I do. I'm not coming at this from a holier-than-thou perspective. Even though I already stated that I'm not a huge gamer myself, I still have my own value proposition issues I'm working through. Like my Apple addiction. It's disgusting, dude.
It's ugly, isn't it? You look at it! Look at it! Look at it! Look at it! I want all of you to look at it!
But that's where personal accountability and responsibility comes in at. Even if you can't change the publishers, even if you can't change the gamers around you, you can change yourself and how you spend your money. Because that's something I had to understand with my Apple purchases. Tim Cook didn't break into my apartment in the middle of the night, steal my wallet, take out the however many grand for a new MacBook, put the MacBook on the desk, and then bail out. I understand that it was ultimately down to my choices. I made the choice to drive down to the store. I made the choice to buy all these ludicrously expensive gadgets. I made the decision to bring them back home, and I made the decision to keep them past the return date. The only one that made me support Apple was me. So in summary, the answer to this gaming issue is twofold. From the collective standpoint, stop tolerating this crap. If game publishers don't get any money for bad behavior, they will stop doing bad behavior, at least until they figure out a way how to reintroduce the bad behavior.
Corporate greed is a war without end.
War never changes.
And on the individual level, not only are you going to be better off financially, but you're also going to have a lot less disappointment and a lot less outrage for partaking in a broken system. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Mr. Marketing. See you next time.